It's no secret that Republicans hate government-funded agencies, and perhaps none more so than the United States Postal Service.
Mr. Postmaster General, welcome. I have three questions I'm going to try to get in my 5 minutes. I want to start with a report, the Office of Inspector General, regarding waste in the Postal Service, USPS ship program, a topic that is of significant concern to this committee. The OIG found that the Postal Service has spent over $1.5 billion developing this ship program, and it's something that the private sector already has, the private sector already offers. The program wasted billions. The OIG recommended ending it. Your chief financial officer agreed to end it, but it is not ended. First, do you agree that the USPS should not spend billions recreating programs that the private sector already offers at a fraction of the cost?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. You know, from our perspective, we want to give the customer the best experience. And generally, I would say giving the customer the best experience is dealing directly with our customers. But we have looked at situations where we would have others between us and our customers to do that type of technology work. We're actually looking at it right now.
But then I apologize for interrupting my limited time. So will you or will you not commit to ending this program immediately? I mean, that's part of what we're all concerned about, at least on this side of the aisle, is the losses. We want to protect the Postal Service, but we've got to make some business decisions.
No doubt about it. And I will tell you, Mr. Chairman, that we have not made a final decision on that, but I appreciate the question. We'll make sure to get you a final decision on that post-haste.
Well, let's talk about the Postal Service Reform Act. I worked very closely when I was ranking member with then Chairman Maloney, and that was a true bipartisan bill because there's bipartisan support for the Postal Service. One of the things that we expected when we gave the Postal Service some money to stabilize the books, everything that you're talking about today, we did 5 years ago. What cost-cutting measures has the USPS implemented since the Postal Service Reform Act passed and became law?
Sure. As you're well aware, you know, we transformed the network. We basically went to a typical hub and spoke network, something that's been around for hundreds of years, been used by every logistics company since 1955. Going to that network, so we reduced transportation costs, we reduced number of times that we move boxes.
Did that reduce costs?
That has reduced costs by about $2.1, $2.2 billion.
Well, according
now remember,
to
our original projection was 3.6, so we aren't there yet.
Based on the numbers, it looks to me like nearly 80% of the U.S. Postal Service's costs are labor, which is the case with just about every government agency. The biggest expense in your entire budget is personnel. And most federal agencies today have hiring freezes. Why would that not be something you would be looking at to reduce costs instead of asking Congress for a bailout?
Oh, we're absolutely looking at that. Now, remember, there's two pieces to our network. There's folks that actually deliver the mail, and you know you don't want to do a hiring freeze there because if we do that, then we won't deliver mail. From a management perspective, you know we have not increased the number of our employees dramatically. But as you know, we've brought in the.
But they've increased, and every other government agency decreasing the number, just like most private sector.
Yeah, actually, in the last 4 years, we have about 35,000 fewer employees. And we're moving toward more of those employees being pre-career rather than career. There's two ways we can really save money here. That's changing our mix of career and non-career, more toward non-career.
You're talking about part-time and full-time, right?
Correct, basically. And the other is overtime, both regular overtime, penalty overtime. You know, those are $100 to $150 million for every percentage point you move them. So that's where we're focused. But you're absolutely right. We have to look at everything. We can't look at just one piece.
And look, we support the postal workers. My grandmother delivered the mail. She spent 27 years as a mail carrier in Red Bull in Springs, Tennessee. I support the post office. Very popular in my district, but people are frustrated with the post office. We all have horror stories from the Postal Service. But what's frustrating to me, and I think many members on this committee, is that it seems like we're trying to do more in the Postal Service in-house instead of privatizing. Even before the Postal Reform Act passed a few years ago, you privatized a lot of the logistics and things like that it appears now the Postal Service is trying to do itself. And it's hard for me to believe, as much trouble as the Postal Service has at delivering the mail on time efficiently, that anyone would believe the Postal Service run by the government can operate cheaper than private companies that have been contracted with the Postal Service for years. And or I'll speak for myself, I'm frustrated that a lot of private companies that have been doing business with the Postal Service for years have been cut out in the last year or two.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure which part of the network you're referring to. The only thing that we've really insourced in the last year is our local transportation network. And we started to insource that. I will tell you, anytime I can do something better, cheaper, we're going to do it. And that's one area.
It's hard for me to believe you're doing it cheaper from the Postal Service. You've done that and you're asking for more money. It's just hard to believe. Maybe it's true, but it's hard for me to believe, being in Congress 9.5 years.
Well, if you believe our accountants, it's true. There's about
I don't know. If they work for the government, I'll have to think about that.
There's about $44 million that we've saved by insourcing that. But even more importantly, it helps service. So when we use third parties, we have to call them, takes them time to get there. Sometimes they'll show, sometimes they won't. When we have our own folks on site with the trucks, they can move immediately. So what we get is better service at a cheaper cost. Now, that's not to say that there's not plenty that we don't do well, but that is one thing we're doing pretty well.
Mr. Chairman, my time's expired. I yield back.
I'm a lifelong letter writer and always use the post office, but I am very concerned with the caliber of service that we are getting and with the fact that the post office continues to come to us for more money. I mailed my husband a Valentine a week before Valentine's Day. He still hasn't received it. People in my office know people who've sent out wedding invitations, mailed in plenty of time. People haven't received them a month later. This is unacceptable, Mr. Postmaster General. Absolutely unacceptable. If you want people to stop not using the post office, you want them to continue to use the post office, then they have to get the kind of service that they deserve and have had in the past. Now, we were told the Delivering for America plan was a long-time strategy to steady Postal Service finances, improve operations, and protect the future of the mail system. But the UPS losses continue. Productivity has declined. Americans get repeated rate increases, slower services. I was a big part of the Postal Service Reform Act also in 2022. So given what's going on, the very negative things that are happening, what evidence suggests the current plan's working? I heard what you just said. And why should Congress expect different results if the DFA plan continues?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on the service issue. We absolutely have to do a better job with what we call the tail of the mail, the wedding invitation that shows up late, the Valentine's Day card that doesn't get there on time. This is an unbelievably complicated network. Just to give you perspective, FedEx and UPS both deliver well under 10 billion packages a year, well under 10 billion. We deliver 110 billion pieces per year. And so this network is so much more sophisticated than those networks because of mail. And so there are hundreds of pinch points where there can be problems. It goes back to what I said earlier. You can build a network, but you got to learn how to operate the network. And I will tell you, we are not great at operating the network. We've put Doug Tolino in charge of that, making sure that all three of our pieces that do delivery are joined together and working together. And you started to see progress. You started to see some very good progress in service. So, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we're there yet.
So can we expect modifications to the plan and better service? Mr. Maroney said that you have controllable costs, but you didn't give us any specifics. We know that if you could reduce controllable costs by roughly 2% per year, you'd put the Postal Service on a path to break even. Given that possibility, what specific steps is USPS taking to reduce controllable costs?
Well, we've got to look at controllable costs everywhere. So we've talked about it in the network. You've got fuel costs. Of course, you're going to see those disappear as we've seen the price of fuel go up. You've got labor costs. You've seen our work hours come down by over 50 million work hours. Now we need to make sure that those work hours are straight time hours, not overtime hours. And we need to make sure that our complement moves more toward pre-career than career. We still have a lot of room to grow there. So there's a lot of dollars to be saved right there. And the rest of the money is going to come by us learning how to operate the network better. But let me make it very, 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 very clear. We are not going to save our way out of the hole that we're in. There is, I know that the prior plan said break even in 2023. Not going to happen. Didn't happen, and I don't expect to see it happen anytime soon on the current path that we are on. Why is that? Because inflation keeps eating up our savings.
Why is Virginia Fox, who presumably lives in the same house as her husband, posting him a Valentine's card? Anyway, why are we so worried about the Postal Service breaking even anyway? Our taxes are currently going to some of the most blatantly monstrous causes of all time, and yet apparently Republicans think that funding the USPS is at the forefront of the American taxpayer's mind. The Republican Party are attacking the Postal Service from a number of different fronts, and it's no coincidence that they're throwing doubt on the effectiveness of the service that they provide as we approach the midterm elections. A SCOTUS decision forwarded by who else but Clarence Thomas ruled against a woman who was suing because the Postal Service were deliberately refusing to deliver her mail. Writing for a 5-4 majority, yet again, Justice Clarence Thomas explained that a law protecting the U.S. Postal Service from lawsuits over lost or miscarried mail bars lawsuits over mail that was intentionally misdelivered. A painfully incorrect interpretation of a very plain rule that effectively allows USPS to choose not to collect or deliver ballots, potentially based on certain political considerations. It has never been more important than it is now to check that you're actually registered to vote, even if you've been registered at the same address for many years and multiple elections. If you do decide to vote by mail, please vote early. Where possible, track the ballot to know your vote has actually been delivered and been counted. Republicans are terrified of a large voter turnout in the midterms, and they will try every trick in the book to shift the blame if your vote doesn't end up being counted.